Hello, everyone. Greg Michlig here, President and CEO at CUInsight.com. And on this episode of Three Questions, it's a pleasure to welcome Joette Colletts, Vice President of the Risk Management Unit with Allied Solutions. Joette, thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you, Greg. I really appreciate this opportunity because this is a risk that is just escalating. So great to provide some, feedback to help our credit unions.
And I am eager to hear more about that. And I'm sure our audience is eager to hear your valuable insights on this topic. So let's get to those three questions. So the first one is we hear the term jackpotting used when ATMs are emptied of all its cash. So can you explain jackpotting?
Yes, and that's a good question. I think some people understand it fully, some to some degree, and some, really not at all. So really, just to clarify, jackpotting is a form of physical cybercrime. And it is what happens is attackers gain unauthorized access to the ATM's internal systems and force it to dispense cash on command. So these attacks are typically carried out by organized criminal groups using advanced tools and techniques. The criminals breach the ATM's upper enclosure, typically called the top hat or the hood. And what they do is they install malicious software that overrides the normal operations of the ATM.
So count me in the group that knew maybe a little bit about it, but I've already learned quite a bit more just in that explanation. How can you secure the hood of the ATM from being opened?
Yeah, so that hood enclosure needs to be secured. It needs to be secured to prevent that bad actor from accessing the internal systems. So it's important to really take a multi-level approach to that as well. So if one security component fails, there's another one and then another one. I mean, we talk about multi-level approach with any type of risk that's happening out there. So our recent cases have involved the use of universal keys. So they're often sold on the dark web to access these ATMs. So the credit union needs to look at that and install a pick resistant lock. So that's the first really step. Now, these attacks frequently do occur during weekends and overnight hours, and that's because surveillance or staffing is at a minimum, and the perpetrators usually do wear masks and gloves, as not to be detected. So that initial access to those keys play a critical role. So that just ensures that only authorized personnel have access to that. So they want to make sure that they do get pick resistant keys only that they have access to. The next thing to really consider is most credit unions look at the money chest of the ATM and make sure that that's well protected with an alarm. But they don't really think about that hood or that top hat being alarmed, and that's critical. So if the key is somehow compromised and they get through, an alarm will go off. So that's really critical, and that alarm would go to law enforcement, notifying them that there's a crime occurring. Thirdly, another really great deterrent is putting in a siren, strobe lights, some type of exterior alarm that's going to, anytime that ATM is tampered with, that's going to hopefully even scare off that criminal. So those are kind of like the three really important things to prevent that bad actor from gaining access to that hood.
That's great information and just kind of the multi-level approach that you mentioned. Really interesting for me to understand or to hear about that. I think the next question then is if the criminal does gain access, how do they manipulate the machine to actually empty the cash?
Yes, and that's really like the next really critical component that credit unions need to really address. So if they gain access to that, what they generally do is they take out that hard drive. So they take out the hard drive because what they want to do is they want to inject malware onto that hard drive. And they take it with them in most cases, and they will come back like maybe hours later or a day later, and they return that compromised hard drive and put it in the machine. And what they're doing with that is they are, configuring it so that it will send commands telling that machine to empty the cassettes without ever swiping a card or entering a PIN. So it is so critical that that hard drive is encrypted. This will prevent the attacker from installing any kind of malware or, to conduct a successful attack. If the drive is encrypted, no data can be read or written. Um, and in line with that, all communications need to be encrypted as well. So I'm going to just talk about like the critical steps here. So it is to encrypt that hard drive, to encrypt the communications. And what that is, it's called a transaction layer security, TLS 1.2. And that encrypts that data that's sent between the terminal and its host server. And that protects against interception. So you want to verify that that end is encrypted. So encryption is really key here. And what we found with these successful attacks is they get in the hood, they take out the hard drive, and it's not encrypted. So they come back with that hard drive and they get all the money out. There are a couple more critical steps that I'll, just bring up too is they want to enforce device whitelisting. So basically what that is, it's security software that allows only authorized programs to run on the machine. And that prevents malware being manipulated. So manipulating that with malware, I should say. So that's really key. Thirdly, and I find this really interesting, maybe there's a better word for it, but I've talked to credit unions. There's a lot of passwords on these machines, and they leave them at the default password. I've asked that question, and they haven't changed those passwords. So that's really critical that they change those to some type of unique passwords and, change them frequently. So, and what I really say is it's really jackpotting is a fast moving and high impact threat. And we've seen that the attack occurs at one branch, they go to another branch and a third branch. So we've had claims coming in from credit unions and not just one machine, but maybe two or three. So they know that the credit union doesn't have that hood secure. They know that the hard drive isn't encrypted from the first attack, so they go to, other ones. And it does typically happen at the island ATMs because they can get to the hood easily. So those are really critical. So I really encourage credit unions to work closely with their ATM vendors, alarm vendors, cybersecurity consultants, and law enforcement just to make sure, ask that question, is my ATM secure against any type of attacks, against jackpotting attacks? There are other attacks today. I just really wanted to emphasize jackpotting because that seems to be really on the rise. And I'm guessing because they find that it might be an easy target, especially with some of these older machines.
Yeah, I've definitely heard more and more about it and use the term critical. I think this has been critical and very important information on what you said is a rising issue for credit unions. And I just want to thank you, Joette. It's been a pleasure to connect with you, and I appreciate you taking the time to join me.
Well, thank you. And I really appreciate the opportunity. I mean, Allied Solutions wants to get this out to all of our policyholders, all of the credit unions throughout the industry. You know, we consider our education to reach everybody. And we do have a really nice white paper that goes through all of the security, in addition to what I talked about today. So credit unions can contact us for that or any of our risk alerts on the subject as well. So I really thank you, Greg. It was a nice opportunity to speak on this topic today.
Great, great. And thanks for that additional information. And a final thank you to all who tuned in for this 3 questions video interview. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.